Get high, get lit, get drunk, get wavy, get wavy. Get high, get lit, get drunk, get wavy.
So hey, we're CLiQ. Welcome to our studio up in North London. We're here with Computer Music to talk about our track Wavey. So Wavey is actually the first record that Max and I, Robin, put together. Started off the beat, I suppose. It started off a bass line with some drums. And then it kind of sat on our hard drive for a month or two, I suppose. We didn't really know what to do with it. We were driving at one stage to a friend's party in Croydon. It's like a rooftop party with a couple of other friends, and we played the track in the car, and a friend of mine started humming out a little melody, so to speak, which ended up becoming the chorus of Wavey, the get lit, get drunk, get high, get wavy. So props out to Herbie Critchlow on that one. But we didn't think much of it after that. We thought it was a good vibe, but we kind of even forgotten about how that was done or whatever the case might be. And then about a month after that, we went to one of these music industry party event things and bumped into Alika. First time we ever met Alika, and her energy was really nice and we really liked her. So within about 5 minutes of talking to her, we sent her the instrumental of Wavey as you hear now. And she put the verses down and she came up with a different chorus. And when we got it back, we were like, okay, this record's definitely got some legs. So we actually were here in the studio, and we rang up Herbie out of the blue just for a catch-up conversation, and we were talking to him about it, and he was like, what about what we did in the car? So he voice noted it, sent it over to us. We put it on the record. Everything gelled, it made sense. We called Alika, got straight down to the studio, did the record, sent it off to the management, and Wavey was born. That's how Wavey actually came together. Did I miss anything there?
No, that's pretty detailed.
Detailed?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, as you can see here, we are doing most things in the box. We have a collaboration of different kind of computers. So we use Macs, but I work on Logic and Ableton, and Max is locked into Pro Tools, as much as I try to convince him out of it, but he won't budge. And then we've got some cool little speakers. I mean, we've got the little Jennies. They're great for writing on. We use these great Adams from the S3Hs, I believe. They're great for monitoring on, getting a good mix. We've actually mastered a couple of things on them as well, I think.
Yeah.
Some of the remixes and stuff.
Yeah.
We like everything to be quite vibey, so we are running a big Adams sub, a 10-inch sub, but we also have the sub for the Jennies. So it's a very boomy little room, but it definitely creates a lot of vibe. For recording, we're using a Neumann U87 mic. I think it's probably one of the best mics on the market. A bit of an all-rounder, does a bit of everything. And then we're using Apollo for our sound cards. We've got an Apollo 6 and a twin sort of daisy chain together. So that's kind of our setup in here. Besides the array of plugins.
Yeah, and we literally run everything in the box basically. So it's literally laptop. I can go home and continue working. Just like Robin can, we have the sessions and then boom, plug it in here, and you continue working. So it's very handy. Back in the day, you had a lot more. I mean, still many studios to do a lot of outboard gear, but we chosen to work within the computer. So it's very compact, system. So basically what we do as well, I mean, even if everything, the final production is actually made on Pro Tools, when we, bouncing ideas back and forward, you sit on Logic, we open Ableton, we can, do a lot of creative work on other platforms, so very, Ableton in particular is very quick into just drag and drop, vibes and loops and this and that to get things going. Logic is somewhere in between Tools and Ableton, I found, and then Tools is quite limited when it comes to the creative side, but when it comes to editing, mixing and arranging, I find Pro Tools a very good platform. So if you have the luxury to bounce between all of them, it's great, but this is how we do it.
I think if Ableton had the mixing screen that Logic and Pro Tools had, and had the recording loop function for vocals that Logic
had, that's great. Yeah.
I think if you had one door that had all of it, we'd probably end up there. with the good finish mix that you get out of Pro Tools. But yeah, like you said, Ableton's great just to get quick ideas in, and then if we like the idea, we'll take it over to Logic and get the vocals recorded, and then export it out to Tools at the end for the final mix. Because I think the end product coming out of Tools is the best.
It's a bit, it's a lot of work to do, but it's worth it, and it's actually, I think from a creative point of view, it's quite good to go through each stages as well, that you have different work environments, so your brain kind of works differently, I mean, many people found their best way to do, but, for us, this kind of tend to work. All right, guys, so this is our session of Wavey. We're running a Pro Tools on a Mac, so it's the 2019.5, which is the latest version, and we're running an 8-core MacBook Pro with 32 gigs of RAM. Pro Tools is fairly old school programs. Not many house producers out there probably use Pro Tools. We do use Ableton and Logic as well as, but from a mixing, editing and arrangement, we work mainly in Pro Tools. So this is what you guys are seeing right now. So what we do is we always start with the drums at the very top and then kind of work ourselves down to effects, crashes and swishes and whatnot, and then strings and music, and then bass lines, and then into the vocals. So everything is kind of lined up, and every session we do is pretty much the same. We always start with a kick at the very top, and then, as I said, drums all the way down to the vocals at the very end, and the master and the buses and whatnot. So the kick we use, we have quite a big library with hits and kicks and crashes and hi-hats and claps and whatnot. We don't use, not many people use samples to play back all the sounds, but we put it straight into the session itself. So each kick is actually played from audio straight out of the Pro Tools session. So as you can see here, it all goes in blocks of 2 bars. I mean, you can do it anything. I just consolidated it together for 2 bars. But we actually start the session with just adding 1 kick straight from the library into the session, and then we kind of put it together sound by sound. So it's a bit, time consuming, but I think it sounds tighter because you can literally go in on the sample here. Is very, very tight. We found sometimes playing from MIDI, he kind of has his own little swing, which, some cases, especially with kicks, is not great. So I find the kick is always very, very tight on playing back from audio straight from Pro Tools. So here we got a kick, and now these days when you take kicks from sample libraries or you create your own kick or whatnot, they tend to be quite processed. A few years back, where you were combining 3-4 kicks to create 1 good kick. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. You have such a big selection of kicks. They sound great out of the box. So we kind of narrow it down. We got maybe 4 or 5 kicks that we kind of tend to go back to and use on a regular basis because they just sound good. I mean, we've been playing it out on clubs and when we've been touring and whatnot, and it just sounds good. So what kicks are good for the dance floor, basically. So this is the end kick, which we use. We just named it end kick for the sake of it, and that's it. And then we move on to, we use a plugin on this kick. To be fair, we only use a small EQ. It's from MCDSP. It's called Filter Bank. And it's been around for years, but it's just a very good sounding filter. Both low and high pass, very, very basic, up to 24-bit, and it cuts literally from the top all the way down. It's very basic, but very efficient and sounds very warm and very nice. So we're just cutting just a touch on just low, kind of mid-30s, just to have that kind of very, very low rumble, doesn't cut through and spoils the mix on the very, very bottom end. And then we have like a little tom that we've been playing from it's like basically an 808 and 909 replica. It's called Boom. And is by Air. It's a German company, And it used to be only by Pro Tools, but now there's, it's cross-platforms. Now you can find it for VST, audio units, and any platform out there can take it, basically. And it's just like a drum machine. You have the step sequencer that you can program internally, or you can play it by MIDI. So all the blue things here, information you see here is MIDI information, basically. And we kind of mix them up a little bit with the kick and the drums tend to be mainly audio, and then some of the bass lines and some of the kind of toms and whatnot, they are on MIDI. And this is the tom that we selected. This is just an 808 high tom that we've been selected, and it's just got that really nice 808 kind of sound to it. And you can select the decay to have the decay, obviously the tune to tune it to the track, and the volume. And it's very, very basic and a bit panning. So, but it's quite basic plugin, but it's just got everything you need. And to get that kind of nice warm punch to it, we run it through a compressor. It's called Smack. You can technically do any compressor because there's nothing special about this. It's just got a very quick attack time, and that's why. And it just sounds very nice, squashed. So if you take that sound, you can see it's compressing around 10 dB, which is not a crazy amount. But what's making most of the work is this Decapitator by Sound Toys. Again, available for all platforms. And it's a great little machine. I use this a lot, especially working with a lot of digital gear. Everything tends to be very clean and polished. And what this does just adds great saturation to your signal, and adds nice warm adds like an harmonic distortion to your sound, which just adds a lot of character. So if you play the sound without it, for instance, just you have the very standard 808 tom kind of sound to it, but as soon as you add that Decapitator, just pulls out the brings out all the tones and the sound from the source, and you've got a bit of drive, low cut, the tone, you can really tune it into what kind of darkness or brightness you want, a bit of high cut and output, and the actual mix. And you've got different kind of styles to the distortion, different characters to the thing that you can flick through until you find a distortion that fits into whatever you're producing. But again, we use this on a lot of things, on drums to vocals and all sorts, to just give that dirty feel to it. So that's tom. And then here we use that's a sound that we bounced already. Is again another tom, and it's being compressed. We use a lot of compression, and we tend to use this compressor, Smack. Unfortunately, only available for Pro Tools, but is nothing special about this. You can find many other Logic or Ableton plugins that will sound very, very similar. And then we do a bit of cutoff on the EQ. We've got a Sony Oxford EQ. Not much happening here apart from 3.7 dB down on 100 Hertz. So it's just to kind of poke out that the kind of frequency down in the mix. Then we got a reverb. I tend to put a lot of reverb, an ambient reverb on drums to kind of give them in different dimensions in the mix, while the kick being very prominent and forward in the mix. Then you've got like hi-hats or toms that you try to put in different aspects or different kind of worlds within the mix, so they don't fight with each other. So we got this tom with a bit of ambient, and that kind of gives it a bit of a nice room. It's a short room to it. It just removes the space for the kick, so it doesn't kind of fight on that. Oops, a bit too quick. So we're just going to put these three sounds that we've been playing around with together. And those sounds are quite distinctive when you hear the Wavey. I don't know if you guys heard the Wavey track, but if you hear that track, instantly you recognize these sounds, basically. And that's how they work together. And then moving on to the claps. As I said to you before, claps, we don't need to process that much these days because, as I said, they sound so good out of the box. but we used two claps and one snare to give that clap sound that we have. So you see actually one of the claps is almost a bit further actually than the other claps. So you have few samples coming out before the actual clap happens on the grid. So we have about 74 samples before to give that kind of lazy clap effect kind of thing. So it's almost like, yeah, you almost got that kind of little latency going on to give that kind of groove to the clap. So the actual hit itself almost happens slightly earlier than the actual grid. But the actual processing on them, a little bit of cutoff, nothing too special, 24 dB, cutting out 180 to lose literally all the bottom end from it. A nice little poke on the head from the BF3, but this is literally a plugin that you've got for Logic as well, which I think is called, you got the CLA 2. So it's literally, we got Wave to use Apollo, both Twin and the X6 with the DSP. So we got literally the Waves one, the Protos one, and the Apollo's audio unit plugins as well. But I tend to use the Protos. It's literally just a nice little tap on the head, basically. Just a 3-4 dB, just to kind of push everything down a touch to make room for everything else. Okay, so that's the two claps, and then moving on to the snare. Again, compression, a bit of room reverb. So I'm using ambient medium with a 351 millisecond, a very, very narrow mix. So it's just a bare 8%. So obviously mostly original and a bit of wet there. So it's not much at all. But all these small details in the bigger picture makes a big difference than when you're all adding up in the mix together with everything else. And then moving on from the clap, snare, and the kick, we've got a hi-hat, open hi-hat. I think it's just a box standard. It's just an old good old 909, a bit processed 909, and then we got it together with another hat together. And I always tend to brighten things up a little bit, and this is a really, really good EQ made by Plugin Alliance. It's MAG. I mean, it's been around for a few years, and it's actually a replica of an existing little EQ, and it's very, very good because it's got a very particular sound on the high end. So it's got something called the air band, and it goes all the way up to 40,000 hertz. Obviously down to 2.5, which, you know, very rarely I use. It's mainly between 10 and 40,000. And obviously over 20,000, it's you know, practically impossible to hear, but it just gives, and as they said, air. And it's just add that kind of, you know, space or air, whatever you want to call it, to the mix. And it's just, it's a kind of emulation of the old school. When you recorded in the old recording studios, they have a lot of vintage gear, and all they had is all tube valves that were giving these kind of, not on purpose, but you know, there was the technology that was around then, and it gave a lot of kind of added harmonics that you don't get with the modern technology, especially working in software like this. And that just brings that kind of air to the frequencies, and it's just, I'm gonna see if you guys can hear it. If you listen to a laptop or headphones, it might be a bit difficult, but you probably can. If I it just adds obviously a lot of brightness to it, but it adds some kind of as I call sparkle to the very top frequency. And for me, that's, you know, many big SSL studios out there have that on their EQs, and just gives that expensive flavor to it. And then moving further on, you know, this session, the drums are very, very, very sparse. We don't have much drums at all going on. It's like the kick drum, obviously the toms from the 808, clap, and the hi-hats, and a few effect sounds like, you know, kind of shuffly snares, like kind of house snares, that you're just kind of doing a bit of shuffling going on. I tend to use now it's all consolidated, but as you can see on the grid, there's not exactly on the grid. You got a bit of a skipping going on there to give a bit of groove. And we use a built-in thing called beat detective that detects the beat. You analyze it, and you can separate. This is before we put in the session, and you can comfort to the groove. So I think in this particular session we use an MPC with a 58% swing. So what it does, in the old MPC drum machines, they had a built-in swing that many hip hop and R&B producers were using to give that kind of shuffle to drums. And I tend to go to between 58 and 54% swing, because it gives them that little shuffle. It doesn't become too sterile or too stiff, basically. And we use that, and that literally just, you can shuffle it, move it around in the session, basically, and that just gives it really, really nice swing. Let's see, I think that's exactly how we swing into the grid. And then, as you can see, it's completely off the grid, but it gives nice little feel. And I think Cubase and Logic and all these have different swings. I don't know if they got an MPC as such, but they got their own swing. You can probably play around and find your own little groove until it feels good. Later in the session, we got some bass hits. Everything obviously is consolidated now, so it looks very, very nice and tidy. But when we're working, everything is kind of a bit rough, and all these have their own edit points, so everything looks like that kind of thing, before we start, and we kind of map it out and put it in place, and then we consolidate and make it look nice and tidy. And the same thing, we've got a few bass hits that goes together with those drums, so it adds a nice little kind of swing to it. The same with here. And this is all kind of bass hits that we have built from our library, that we either use, in this case, I think we're using Contact, or Massive for that. And let's see, I think that's Massive. That's Massive as well. But our main bass line, which I'm going to come to right here, and see here, is when we did this, we didn't have Contact for Pro Tools, but now we've got it, but we were using this Patchwork. Patchwork is a great little plugin that brings in other plugins to platform that doesn't support certain plugins. For instance, now Pro Tools. So Pro Tools brings in VST and audio units into tools, and we can use them. And it's really, really cool. The library is not loaded because we haven't got the external drive with us. But here just shows we got 3 different patches from a library that we built over the years. And it's like a top bass and a low bass and a mid bass that we put together to have different characters to the actual sound, to the final sound. So if you take the main sound here, if you go down there, just unsolo just that, or solo this. So this is the wavy bass line that we did. As you can probably hear, is very processed. And this is the different sounds. If you just solo one of the sound, that's just one top sound. And then we got the kind of the lower end. That's the lower end. And then we got the kind of the MIDI kind of sound. Together, they make that particular bass sound, basically. And they all come from a root, C root, put together. From there, it goes through a L2, waves. Just try to literally pull up the level and flatten everything out as high as possible. Then we just got a nice little touch of 30 hertz because you don't want anything kind of interfering below 30. And then we got actually quite unusual little plugin. It's called PM. I think it's called Plugin Mix.
Plugin Mix.
And the plugin itself is called Loud Bass. And it's very difficult to get nice warm bass with digital platforms. And what this does, again, adds a harmonic distortion to whatever frequency you want it to work with. It goes from 60 hertz all the way up to 500 hertz. And I always tend to take it down to 60 hertz because that's the nicest and warmest feel. And if you play it, if you listen to decent pair of headphones, you probably can hear the difference when you bypass this. Adds that really nice bottom end, gives that warm feeling that in many cases it disappears when you're working in Logic or Pro Tools or even Ableton Live. And from there on, we're moving to again, Mac. And I'm emphasize the frequency around 10 to just poke out that kind of high notes in the mix. Not too much, it's just about 5 dB, and everything else is pretty neutral. It's just that kind of high mid. And then another really, really good little plugin. It's actually for free from Softube. And they do, it's a very, very basic, again, it's just a saturation knob, which you can do in 3 different phases: high, neutral, or low. And in this case, we're using low, and just a few dB up, and just adds, again, more character to the sound. It just add that little warmth touch for it. If you unmute it, it's just a bit too clean. And if you put it on, it just add that little, it's not distortion, but it's just a little bit of saturation. Again, it's very similar to the Decapitator that we use. It's a bit nice, it's not as aggressive, but it just adds character to the sound. So if you want a little bit dirtier kind of flavor to drums or even vocal, it's a great little free plugin that you can download from Softube. And then I'm sure many people have seen this, is from Wave's Factory. And what it does, we feed the kick. So the kick is side changed into this processor. So what this does, it analyzes the kick's frequency, and it automatically deducts this with the amount of dB you want here. So you've got a ratio all the way from 0 to 100, and we always tend to put it around here. But what it does, you can see the blue signal is kind of the kick, and here you see what it is actually deducting and making room for the bass. So this really frees up the frequencies in a mix and kills that frequency in the bass, making room for the kick drum. So the kick drum really, really pokes through. You could put this on anything bass heavy sounds, basically. And it's a great help to the mix when it comes to the bass.
So that's all we've got time for right now. But if you want to see the rest of this interview, pick up the latest edition of Computer Music.